Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, this is either going to be in addition to a video that I made earlier when I reviewed that of Dante's Boxing Nation, or this is just going to be a separate video that I'm going to reveal altogether. I usually tend to like to review Boxing Ego's videos a little bit better anyway, because Boxing Ego, in my view, yes, of course, in my view, he can be very biased and, he can have a certain narrative afoot, of course, in my view, but, he at least brings up more good points in my view. Certainly better points than Dante and Naki TV. Just my personal view of it. But, of course, many of the LDBC and new media channels, they've been trying to allege now that Gervonta Tank Davis is the official face of boxing. Do I necessarily agree with that? I'm not going to say that Gervonta Tank Davis, as of right now, is the main face of boxing. I still would have to go with Canelo Alvarez because Canelo, on average, more than likely is going to get the more pay-per-view sales. Now, of course, a lot of the guys would bring up and say, well, Gervonta Tank Davis, he just most recently got 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, or however many buys the Ryan Garcia fight was. And that's true. But at the end of the day, that's been a fight that has been on the horizon and has been several years in the making. It was supposed to get over a million pay-per-view buys. Both Gervonta Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, they have been somewhat of, internet stars and boxing stars for the past several years. And that was a fight that was several years in the making. Everyone knew that those two were on a collision course between Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Tank Davis. Everyone knew that that fight was going to be, a big, huge fight just in terms of star power alone. Like I said, it would kind of be like if Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder fought, except Gervonta Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, of course, they don't have quite the experience that those two fighters do. Like Anthony Joshua and Wilder, neither of them have any belts right now. But if that fight, happened, next, it would be the biggest fight in the heavyweight division, no doubt about it. It just depends on, how marketable it is and also how much it's been built up. But if you put Canelo Alvarez in the ring with a lot of these fighters, like I've already said, he does at least 300,000 pay-per-view buys minimum. And that's the reason why I still have Canelo Alvarez as the main face of boxing. Now, why are they trying to allege that Canelo is no longer the face of boxing? And they've been trying to allege this for the past several years, even when he's clearly done the most pay-per-view numbers. I think that more than likely, so they can say that Canelo isn't fighting great competition and, he's not as great as what people try to say that he is, because clearly take a look at the events and blah, 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 all this other shit. Just a way to try and tear Canelo Alvarez down once again to make sure that he's not as fondly remembered as what a lot of the media is trying to make him out to be. That's just my personal view of it, but let's see what Mr. Boxing Eagle has to say.
Hey, yo.
That's a great entrance. Gervonta Tank Davis passes Canelo Alvarez, in the beginning with that green smoke, because it's all smoke and mirrors. it's all cap. That's basically a great intro. That says it all right there.
That's it. I don't want to hear nothing else. Gervonta Davis is the face of boxing. Canelo Alvarez, baby, you want baby?
I'll say this, and I've been saying this once again for a very long time. Gervonta Tank Davis, in my view, will eventually become the face of boxing if he does step into the ring with the big names. He has a lot of talent. He has a lot of star appeal. He has a very entertaining fighting style. Of course, he gets a lot of knockouts. He has a great supporting fan base. He does sell out certain stadiums. But once again, Gervonta's going to have to get in the ring with with certain better opponents. And isn't it very interesting how Boxing Ego always tries to allege with Canelo or certain other fighters that they move in a certain way? If we want to really talk about a fighter that's moving in a certain way or taking cherry pick after cherry pick after cherry pick, it would be Gervonta Tank Davis. I mean, other than Ryan Garcia, what fight has he really been in that people have really mainly been asking for? How many people really ask for that Isaac Pitbull Cruz or that Rolly Romero or that Mario Barrios fight or the Hector Garcia fight? Like, no one gives a shit about any of these fights. And that's why the majority of them haven't done anywhere over 200,000 pay-per-view buys.
Know that Canelo Alvarez and Jermell Charlo did a reported 650,000 to 750,000 pay-per-view buys. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. So Dan Rafael and others are reporting the Canelo versus Charlo numbers are in, and they are saying that the numbers are estimated to be about 650K to about 750K. Now, in the world of streaming and piracy and fire sticks and things like that, these are solid numbers. But
it's going to be a really special game.
things like that, these are solid numbers. But they said Canelo Alvarez was the face of boxing, and reports said
Yes, and Canelo Alvarez still is the main face of boxing. I don't really understand why these guys always have their pennies in a twist. As you know, and it's not even it's not even just been this time. They've been trying to allege that other certain black fighters have been over Canelo as the main face of boxing. Like that's how you know a hater when you see one. Like not even just trying to tear down Canelo Alvarez as a fighter. They can't even have him be the face of boxing. It's like, dude, what is the issue?
that Canelo Alvarez himself got $50 million for this particular fight. So that being considered, I don't know if that makes the pay-per-view results and turn-in as justifiable, right? So again, these are good numbers in general, but when you consider promotion and how much Jermell Charlo made and how much Canelo made, I expected the numbers to be a bit greater, to be honest, because
And they're probably around what I had predicted. Because Jermell Charlo, to be quite honest with you, he's not really that big of a draw. And I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that. Jermell Charlo has never really had super duper great star power. It just is what it is.
Canelo's last fight on Showtime for Undisputed, Canelo Alvarez did over 800,000.
And that's why I say, like, Canelo Alvarez, and this is why I've been saying about Demetrius Bubble Andrade. A lot of people don't want to fight Demetrius Bubble Andrade because, yes, he's a very dangerous fighter, but he also has no star appeal whatsoever. Like, none. He's never been in a fight, really, of actual valid importance. And that's not me saying that certain fighters could have not took the fight against him. That's not me saying that he's not been somewhat avoided. But if you're like a Canelo Alvarez, why the hell would you want to get in a fight with Demetrius Bubble Andrade, who's relatively dangerous, to where if you do lose against him, the pay-per-view sales are pretty much going to do very bad because not a lot of people outside of boxing really know who the fuck Demetrius Bubble Andrade is. He doesn't really have a super-duper crowd-pleasing style, and on top of that, he might have a style that's tricky for you anyway. Why the hell would you take that fight over the Charlo brothers fight, or a David Benavidez fight, or potentially a Caleb Plant fight, or certain other fights? It's no offense against Andrade, but and hopefully the numbers do well against David Benavidez. But, Andrade, in my view, had he made certain better moves in his career and went after certain fighters and made better decisions, his career could have panned out very differently. Because more than likely, what we're going to see from Demetrius Andrade is that he's more than likely probably going to lose to David Benavidez, possibly lose one or two more fights in his career, and then that's pretty much probably what we're all going to see from Demetrius Andrade. I don't really expect much more out of him. Very unfortunate, but that's just how certain careers go, especially when they don't make the right decisions.
So he did close to $1 million. So you see, Canelo, there's been some signs of slippage. And I've said the same thing over and over again. I continue to show my greatness in the sport of boxing. I say the things, whether they're popular or unpopular, it doesn't matter.
Well, you say the things overall that, you go according to your favorite fighters, and on top of that, your pro-black agenda. That's what you say.
But at the end of the day, over time, it takes the world of boxing to catch up to young ego and what I said. And when it came to Canelo, I told you his star power was dwindling. When it came to Canelo Alvarez,
it is dwindling a little bit, but once again, I still need to see Canelo Alvarez. I need to see him completely get knocked off that mountaintop as the quote-unquote pay-per-view king. How will we finally know when that happens? I think that Gervonta Davis in his next fight, probably against one of these Latino cherry picks that he's probably going to fight again. If he does like 400,000 pay-per-view buys and it's against a guy that is not that well known, that will be probably the first sign. Because Canelo Alvarez against guys like John Ryder and, these other guys, he can still do 300,000 pay-per-view buys. But if Gervonta Davis is doing a legitimate 400 to 500,000 pay-per-view buys, that would tell me that Gervonta Tank Davis, that he clearly is definitely right there with Canelo, or that he has already surpassed him. That would be that. But once again, I need to see more than a fight that has been in the buildup for the past several years against Ryan Garcia. One of the biggest fights in boxing, and in terms of popularity, was going to be the biggest fight this year, other than that of Terrence Bud Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. When it came down to it, was going to be the biggest fight this year because of both of the amount of star power that both of them had. So that's not really comparable. So these guys, what they're trying to make the point is that, oh, well, clearly Gervonta Tank Davis is the face of boxing because Gervonta Tank Davis had 1.2 million pay-per-view buys, and, Canelo Alvarez only had 700,000. Right, but it's not really that comparable because that's been a fight that's been in the build-up for several years. Like I said, that would be like if AJ and Deontay Wilder, if they ended up doing a fight and they ended up getting over a million pay-per-view buys. Now to be fair, one could say that those guys are more of the face, but right now, I'd probably say the face of the heavyweight division is Tyson Fury. But just because someone does greater numbers on one pay-per-view doesn't mean that they're necessarily the face of boxing.
I told you that him going to DAZN, an app that didn't really have major visibility here in America, all these things would hurt Canelo Alvarez. And I think that has been the case because when Canelo...
I don't know if it's hurt Canelo Alvarez a whole lot because he still did 700,000 pay-per-view buys. I think that if the pay-per-view only did about 300,000 or maybe 400,000, that maybe you could allege that. I just think a lot of people, including myself, knew who Jermell Charlo really was. And on top of that, of course, they seen that Jermell was moving up 2 weight classes. But I think that if Canelo Alvarez, if he fights Jamal or if he fights David Benavidez, or possibly Dimitri Bivol, that the pay-per-view could probably do even greater.
Was with HBO in general. Canelo Alvarez was a bigger name and a bigger star, and he was producing, I would say, with lesser names than the Jermell Charlo, he was producing kind of similar numbers, if you will, right?
Well, when he was with HBO, I don't think that they were lesser names than Jermell Charlo because, maybe I'd have to see his direct pay-per-view numbers, but Canelo Alvarez, when it came down to it, I mean, he was still fighting fighters like Miguel Cotto, Gennady Golovkin. All those fights happened on HBO pay-per-view. He fought Amir Khan, who was a relatively, well-known name. When it came down to it, I'm not really sure how many that did. Chavez Jr. So I'm not really going to say that a lot of these names are, lesser than that of Jermell Charlo. A lot of them are probably right there, if not even higher. But, I understand where ego is coming from. I just don't think I can allege quite as of yet that Gervonta is the face of boxing when he's only done one great pay-per-view.
His numbers in general seem to be better. So, I don't know. I don't know if this is deemed a success. I'm just telling you, between Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford, and also...
And this fight, Canelo Alvarez versus Jermell Charlo, did just as good as Errol Spence versus Terrence Bud Crawford. But once again, that shows you how much star appeal that Gervonta Tank Davis versus Ryan Garcia fight have. For neither of them to have a belt at the 140-pound or 135-pound weight division, and for it to do over a million pay-per-view buys, shows you how much of a build-up that fight had over the past several years.
Canelo versus Charlo, I did expect the numbers to be greater for both fights, to be honest. But
I think I definitely expected it to be greater for the Terrence Bud Crawford fight. I was a little bit surprised. I think that fight only did about 750,000 pay-per-view buys. I was a little bit surprised that fight only did that much.
Here's the thing. It's not that people make less money, but with piracy and fire sticks and stuff, it's really showing that we're in a time where it really has to be a fight that the fans are familiar with and a fight that the fans are demanding, and that's how you typically...
I would certainly agree.
...get the better number. And that's also what I've said about Canelo Alvarez. One of the main problems with Canelo is he has a diva type of mentality.
And that's exactly why Boxing Ego wants to try and allege this shit about, Canelo Alvarez's events aren't doing very well. Even though they've all been very big successes for especially who he's been fighting, depending on the competition. All of his, fights against, good fighters have usually done very well. All his fights against, the people that may be a little bit lower, they've still done decently well. So once again, it's very interesting how he always talks about Canelo, getting these, not so great events. They always talk about Gervonta Davis selling out stadiums. Well, shit, there's a lot of fighters that sell, there's a lot of fighters that sell out stadiums. How many pay-per-view buys are you getting? They never talk about that with Gervonta Davis. They only talk about how he's selling out stadiums.
And he wants to beat to the sound of his own drum, and he wants to move how he wants to move.
When you're a black fighter and you're fighting in places like Atlanta and Baltimore and all that other stuff, and that's a primary black fan base down there, a great big black population, you're supposed to sell out that stadium. Now, of course, overall, certain people may allege the same thing when it comes to Canelo versus Ryder in Mexico and Canelo in Texas, or maybe something in California, or maybe in Vegas, because of course there's a lot of Mexicans there, I believe. Maybe he didn't sell out some of those stadiums. I would have to look.
But the world of boxing is showing less and less interest in some of these moves. But if Canelo did what I said,
and that's the reason overall why Ego is alleging this, because he's going to try to allege that Canelo Alvarez is making weak moves and cherry picks. So then tell me, Mr. Ego, why is Canelo Alvarez, even against John Ryder, getting 300,000 pay-per-view buys, but Gervonta Davis against, these allegedly elite opponents, which are really trash-ass opponents, and Hector Garcia, Mario Barrios, when it comes down to it, who the hell else has he fought? Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Rolly Romero. Why are these fights only getting 250,000 buys at max? Ego never talks about that. And then as soon as the pay-per-view bombs, he says, "Oh, well, why are you pocket watching?" Isn't that interesting? It's never pocket watching whenever it comes to Canelo Alvarez's numbers. It's never pocket watching when it comes to Canelo Alvarez's, Tyson Fury's numbers. It's never pocket watching. It's never insecure. It's never pocket watching. It's never why you worried about another man's numbers when it's Canelo Alvarez. But then when it comes to that of Gervonta Davis, oh, why you insecure? Why you pocket watching? Get the fuck out of here.
And what I think would be the better move for boxing, I truly believe you would see an improvement altogether across the board. The fact is, Jermell Charlo, they try to hype it up. This was an easy fight to predict. The outcome would look something like what we've seen. So I wasn't surprised at all that the fight played out.
Well, allegedly this fight was so easy to predict, but even Ego was saying it. See, the thing that Ego will do that kind of annoys me to a degree is that he'll say that his accuracy is right on, but what Ego will basically do is that he'll give you several possible different outcomes when it comes down to it, and then he'll say, "See, I was right." You can't say that you were 100% right overall when it comes down to it if you didn't go with a confirmed outcome. That's basically the thing overall that I'm saying, it's because basically anyone can do that. The thing is that I predicted is that if Canelo Alvarez was going to come in great shape and if he was going to be a better version of what he was in the John Ryder fight, this fight probably was not going to be that close. And I was absolutely right, because Jermell Charlo was not on that Canelo Alvarez level. He's not, the same size as Canelo, by a little bit. And on top of that, he's nowhere near as skilled. Nowhere near.
It was lackluster. You got a guy who is not in the division, which is what I've always maintained, and he's moving up 14 pounds to fight top three.
Once again, Jermell Charlo is not really a guy that is that much smaller than Canelo, because Canelo is not really a natural super middleweight. And on top of that, Jermell Charlo, he could easily fight at the middleweight division. Jermell Charlo didn't lose that bad just purely off of size. He lost that bad, yes, sure, probably because there was a power, and on top of that, a little bit of a size difference, but also because the skill difference was just not even close. The defense, the counterpunching ability, the boxing IQ, the head movement, the angles, the feints, everything went to Canelo Alvarez.
And
I always said this. I even said this years ago. If Jermell Charlo was going to get in the ring with Canelo Alvarez was going to tear him a new ass. And that's exactly what happened.
Champion who's undisputed, and he's at least strong with experience over 160. Experience at 168, experience at 175, and then you have a guy who never really fought above.
Once again, when were these standards for any other fighter in the history of boxing? Whenever it comes to a fighter that they don't like, they always tell these fighters to move up in weight and fight the most dangerous guy. Remember when Vasily Lomachenko was ranked as the #1 pound-per-pound fighter, and these guys were claiming that he was afraid of Manny Pacquiao Go up to 140, go up to 147 and fight Manny Pacquiao, fight Josh Taylor, even though Vasily Lomachenko had never had any experience there. You guys remember that shit? But then when it comes to Canelo fighting Jamal Charlo or certain fighters, oh, they're not accustomed to that weight. Well, shit, Vasily Lomachenko wasn't accustomed to 140 or some of those other weight divisions. But you had no problem with him potentially moving up there. And it was allegedly a duck because he was afraid of Manny Pacquiao, who's a damn 140 to 147 pounder. Like, get the fuck out of here, man. Like, when it came down to it. Canelo, if you're moving up to cruiserweight, fight Alexander Usyk, even though knowing damn well that Alexander Usyk would be like 40 pounds heavier than him. Like, get the fuck out of here, man.
154, and in one fell swoop, he's supposed to just pack on all this muscle, and it's all supposed to translate to packed on muscle.
Holy guacamole. Our company is going bankrupt because of this discount. Buy 3 soaps and get 3 for free.
And it's all supposed to translate to packed on muscle with power in the new division, with speed, and in the world of boxing.
Right, but once again, for anyone that knows boxing, Jamal Charlo is not a guy that is really that much smaller than Canelo. Canelo, once again, is a guy that at one point in time was the 154-pound champion. He is not a natural 168-pounder.
That typically does not work. The only time in instances where maybe that does work is if a person is starving themselves and depleting their muscle and they're so far gone from such a...
Jamal Charlo could easily, once again, make 160 pounds. So once again, I don't want to hear any of this shit about, oh, Canelo was way, 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 way bigger. All the LDBC and pro-black channels are all trying to make this excuse about, oh, well, Canelo was so much more big. No, he wasn't. You know, where was this excuse once again where Canelo fought Dimitri Bivol? That was an example of a fighter that probably was naturally 2 weight classes bigger. You know, now Canelo was a little bit bigger in that fight even than what he normally is, because Canelo tried to pack a little bit more muscle mass on, which in my view was a major mistake. It tired him out.
Strenuous and extreme weight cut.
Now, had Jamal Charlo fought someone like a Caleb Plant, you know, or maybe had he fought someone like a David Benavidez, then that would have been a serious problem, because David Benavidez, you know, is someone that could fight at light heavyweight. Caleb Plant is a legitimate 168-pounder. Canelo's a little bit girthy and he's a little bit, sizey for his size, but he's not a guy, once again, that's a natural 168-pounder. You know, he's 5'8" with a 71-inch arm reach. He balloons up a little bit in weight. But once again, this is a guy that probably is around a natural middleweight, maybe a little bit bigger than that of a natural middleweight.
When they move up and they finally give their body a relief and they finally give their body a break, then their body reciprocates because they feel better, they feel stronger, they're less lethargic and things like that. So there are rare cases where if you move up one division, you're not depleting your muscles and dehydrating as bad. So you could just be stronger based on the fact that it's less wear and tear and damage on your body and you were cutting too much weight, right? But that's really not going to be the case when you're moving up 14 pounds like Jermell Charlo did. So I think these numbers, and especially being the same promoter, Showtime, PBC, TGB Promotions, Canelo Promotions, being lower than the Caleb Plant numbers, I think that shows you that there was a lack of interest, or at least a little bit more lack interest than some people expected. They thought they would be able to peg this undisputed versus undisputed and people would just fall for it. But people...
I also don't think that Jamal Charlo is as big of a draw as what many people are trying to allege. I don't think that Jamal Charlo, against a lot of fighters, this is just my personal view, I don't think that Jamal Charlo, even against Terrence Bud Crawford, I don't even know if that fight's going to go super well, because you do have to sell the fight in a certain way. I do agree with Ego a little bit that going up 14 pounds, that it probably did hurt the fight a little bit. Now, do I think that this fight was a quote-unquote cherry pick? No, not necessarily, because once again, Jamal Charlo is a guy that at least somewhat can compare in Canelo in terms of size. Canelo is not a guy that is as big as Caleb Plant. He's not a guy that's as big as Andre. He's not big as Danny Jacobs. He's not big as these guys. You know, he's a little bit, girthy for his size. But once again, he's not a guy that is, just this heavyweight fighter. He's a guy, once again, that's 5'8" with a 71.5-inch arm reach. And he does balloon up to about 185, I believe. But once again, there's certain middleweight fighters that do the exact same shit. Like Golovkin, I believe, is somewhat comparable in weight as well. At least I believe he was.
The fans are getting smarter and smarter. They're not going to just fall for it because we know the two names. That's why through this whole buildup, you didn't see me hyped for this fight as much as some people were because I felt it was foolish. There's guys
because you knew more than likely that Jermell Charlo was not going to beat Canelo. The only Canelo Alvarez fights that the LDBC and new media are happy about with Canelo Alvarez is fights that they believe that Canelo Alvarez is going to lose. You understand that, when it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis, they don't give a shit who he fights. They're always excited to watch Gervonta Tank Davis. Against Hector Garcia, all these bums, Hector Garcia, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, these other guys, tune in because it's going to be a great event. But Canelo against Charlo or Caleb Plant, all these other guys, there's always some bullshit excuse.
In or around Canelo's divisions that could put up true fights with Canelo.
But I will say this, Canelo Alvarez is going to have to fight David Benavidez either next fight or the fight right after that. Because if he doesn't, then he will be, exposed as a dude that did avoid David Benavidez. He is going to have to fight David Benavidez.
And he's not fighting them like David Benavidez. Guys like David Morrell Jr., guys like Demetrius Andrade, who just moved up to the division, guys like a Bevo rematch at 7.
Well, wait a minute. Demetrius Andrade just moved up to the weight division. He's not accustomed to 168 pounds. So why overall would there be any less of an excuse than that? And the Demetrius Andrade fight is not really going to do super duper well either. Because if you ask a lot of people outside of boxing who the fuck Demetrius Andrade is, they're going to be like, who? Because there's no offense against Andrade, but that man has no star appeal whatsoever.
75. Or Bevo even said he would come down to 68. Guys like Artur Beterbiev at 75 if he wants to fight a unified champ. There's compelling.
And once again, it's very interesting that they asked Canelo Alvarez to fight these fighters. They would never ask any of the Charlo brothers. They would never ask Andrade. They don't ask David Benavidez to take these fights. They only ask Canelo Alvarez. Isn't that interesting?
Fights out.
Now, understandably, Canelo also has a different type of standard. He's looked at as the #1 pound-for-pound fighter or the face of boxing according to most people. But it's very interesting because you also have a lot of these channels like Dante that love to allege that Canelo would get beaten by David Benavidez or a lot of these other fighters. The fight wouldn't even be close if it was against the Charlo brothers. He's not winning those fights. But isn't it interesting? Canelo, go fight Usyk. Go fight Bivol. Go fight Artur Beterbiev. Go fight this guy. Go fight that guy. How many of the black fighters that they like are they asking, for these guys to face? That's how you know, once again, that they even know that Canelo's on a different level.
It's just a matter of Canelo not being a diva and choosing to fight him. Canelo, he gets mad when you...
Right, so Canelo Alvarez is a diva because he's fighting Jermell Charlo. What the hell does that make Gervonta Tank Davis then? The same fighter that you love to praise for fighting all these Latin bums.
Bring up other names like Benavidez or Andrade, he'd be like, oh, they're horrible, or you fight nobody, and, I fight anybody, I don't care, I don't effing care. But obviously you do effing care because you're pulling up a guy from 154 instead of fighting people who've been waiting in the queue who are your size in your weight class where you're a champion, like Andrade, Morrell, Benavidez, or even Bivol, who said he would come down to 68. So, the numbers are cool, the numbers are solid, but for Canelo to get better numbers, you really have to get an opponent that people have to believe that opponent has a chance. That's why Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia, they did an awesome job of selling that fight. And Ryan Garcia is actually bigger than Gervonta Davis. So him talking...
He's bigger, but the skill set all in all. And if we really want to go there, these guys, they love to say that, Canelo's bigger than a lot of these guys. If we really want to talk about Gervonta Tank Davis, he probably rehydrates just as heavy as what Ryan Garcia does or around there. Gervonta Tank Davis is very similar to Canelo, where in terms of, he's at 135, but he's the most girthy guy there. He could easily rehydrate probably to 140, very easily.
Him having...
And when I say 140, I'm not talking about walking around at 140. I'm talking about rehydrating to natural 140-pound fighters.
We know Ryan has power. We know Ryan Garcia has speed, and he exuded confidence, so it gave people faith that Ryan Garcia, even if it didn't happen, which it didn't, which Ego Stradamus predicted that fight as well, right? People have to have that.
It wasn't really a hard fight to predict. If you're talking about the Ryan Garcia fight, maybe he was just talking about something else. Let me rewind it.
People faith that Ryan Garcia, even if it didn't happen, which it didn't, which I, again, Ego Stradamus predicted that fight as well, right?
It wasn't hard to predict. Wasn't hard to predict at all. Ryan Garcia, although he's a very physically gifted fighter, he has a lot of holes in his game. He's a bit chinny, in my view, at times when it comes down to it. He does not have great defense. He does not have great feet when it comes down to it. He does not have great head movement. That fight was gonna last, as long as Gervonta Davis wanted it to.
People have to have that belief, and Ryan Garcia gave people the belief and an exciting build-up to the fight, as well as Tank Davis, and that's why Tank Davis is the face of boxing. Tank Davis and Ryan.
Well, no, Tank Davis isn't really the face of boxing right now. I think that he's on the come up, but like I said, Canelo Alvarez, once again, on average, he's still getting greater pay-per-view numbers than Gervonta Davis. We can't just take a look at one pay-per-view fight that was successful, a fight that was in the build-up in many people's subconscious minds for the past several years, and then just say, oh, well, he's clearly the face of boxing. That would be like if Canelo Alvarez, when he fought Gennady Golovkin, and then Floyd Mayweather Jr., he fights someone like Marcos Maidana and Andre Berto, and Canelo Alvarez does 1 million pay-per-view buys and Mayweather only does 500,000. That's like me saying, like, oh, Canelo is the new face of boxing. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. You have to take it on averages. You have to overall do, once again, a multitude of fights. You can't take a look at one fight and say, oh, he's the new face of boxing, because one of the biggest fights that could have happened over the past several years ended up happening.
Garcia did better numbers than Undisputed. So Tank and Ryan had 0 belts at stake, but did better numbers than alleged.
And what no one's really talking about is that Canelo Alvarez did comparable numbers with that of the Errol Spence versus Terrence Boyd Crawford fight.
Like 8 belts or whatever they were saying, Undisputed versus Undisputed, Canelo versus Jermell Charlo, because again, deep down inside, I don't think people bought it. And then the other thing that Canelo and Charlo did,
well, this was never going to be a fight that was going to do over 1 million pay-per-view buys. When you talk about a fight that's going to do over 1 million pay-per-view buys, you can't just be talking about boxing fans. You have to also be interested in terms of the outside world. And Jermell Charlo, in my view, I just don't think a lot of people take a look at Jermell Charlo and really believe that he's as much of an elite fighter as what other people try to push him. I also don't believe that he has as much of a star appeal. There's a reason why he's never been on a pay-per-view headliner. There's a reason overall why, I don't know how many views he gets, but there's a big part of the reason why Jermell Charlo, that he's not as big of a draw as some other fighters. Because to be honest, he's not really in that deep of a division. It just is what it is.
My opinion, that shot themselves in the foot is just like in the fight, Jermell Charlo was extremely respectful of Canelo Alvarez. He was extremely respectful, both of them.
And on top of that, Jermell Charlo was not very talkative against that of Canelo Alvarez. He was not really as trash talking, Canelo as much as what he did. And he did that because he was scared to death of Canelo. He knew what was coming after him.
We're extremely respectful.
Now, Jermell versus Terrence Bud Crawford, that's a fight that you could probably sell even better. Because Jermell Charlo and Terrence Bud Crawford, they have a real beef with each other. And on top of that, they're more, Jermell Charlo, of course, he'll be at 154, and Terrence will be moving up one weight division. So in the subconscious minds, even though Jermell, he's not really that much more than Canelo anyway. But, in the minds of people, that would be more comparable. So that fight maybe has a chance, to do better. But it also may not. Because, once again, Jermell's I just don't think that he's as big of a draw as what people try to say that he is.
Each other in the buildup. So if there's already an inherent problem, meaning Jermell Charlo is not of the weight class, and that's why some people don't have the belief that he could beat Canelo at 68 with no experience at 68 or above 60, then on top of that, you didn't even do a fair job of making it like WWE or theatrical or trash talking or anything like that. So again, there just wasn't that much belief.
Well, Canelo Alvarez tried to do it. It was Jermell Charlo. Jermell Charlo pretty much laid down in the press conferences, and on top of that, he laid down in the fight. And you know why that is? And I always say this. When fighters all of a sudden change their complete attitude all of a sudden, it's because they know what's coming.
It was really fueled off of Canelo's fan base, Charlo's fan base, and
That's
just
why, Deontay Wilder, he could talk all that shit all he wanted to about Tyson Fury cheating, blah, blah, blah. The reason why he was completely silent in the press conference, overall against Tyson Fury in the third fight, and why Fury was still talking, and people said, oh, Fury looks scared. Fury's always going to talk shit during the press conferences. That's what Tyson Fury does. But Deontay Wilder usually does it as well. He was silent as a church mouse, in that press conference. You know why? Because he knew another ass kicking was coming.
some boxing fans that wanted to see the fight, but the fights that do better, you have to have fans that believe that the other person at least has an inkling of a chance. And those fights, from my experience, have done better, like Conor McGregor and Mayweather. I didn't think Conor
Yeah, Conor McGregor certainly had a great chance against Mayweather. I don't know what the fuck that comparison has to do with anything.
had a chance. I got that prediction right as well. But
No shit. Like who the fuck brags overall about getting their prediction correct in Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Conor McGregor? A person with Down syndrome could have overall gotten that prediction right. Like who the fuck brags about an MMA fighter getting in the ring with the greatest boxer of the past 20 plus years when it comes down to it and then losing that fight? No shit. Anyone could have predicted that.
Conor had the ability and the panache and the gift of gab.
No, what Connor had once again is that he was doing so great in the UFC, and on top of that, a lot of people were tricked overall because they don't realize the difference between MMA and boxing. They think just because an MMA fighter knows how to strike that he's going to be able to compete well in boxing. Striking is not boxing. Boxing is a completely separate sport than that of MMA striking. It just is what it is. But because Conor was the most dominant MMA athlete potentially at the time, and on top of that, he knows how to build up fights, and he was one of the most popular athletes, not just in the UFC, but on the planet. That's the reason overall why that fight did so well. And a big part of the reason why the Ryan Garcia and Gervonta Davis fight did so well is because Ryan Garcia was also one of the more popular fighters on the planet and one of the more popular athletes on the planet. Now, a lot of people say, what are you talking about? He was never on a pay-per-view, blah, blah, blah. Once again, go take a look at his Instagram following. There's a reason why Ryan Garcia has a great Instagram following. How many great fighters do you know that have the same following as a Ryan Garcia? Almost nobody.
To convince his fans that he could beat Floyd Mayweather, and Mayweather was an old man, and guys like Skip Bayless would go on his show Undisputed and talk about how Mayweather had never felt power like Conor McGregor and things like that. So all in all,
that Tyson Fury versus Ngannou fight also is a little bit interesting. I know they say that Ngannou has like the world record of the punch and all this sort of shit. MMA fighters usually don't tend to punch as hard as boxers. And the reason why that is because their feet are usually a little bit better. When it comes down to it, they put a little bit more torque into their punches. They usually, at times, I'm not going to say MMA fighters don't use their hips, but, at times, boxers know how to use more torque. They put their feet and they put their hips in more of the torque of the punches. And on top of that, they're just more straight. They're just more powerful. So I would not surprise me at all if Fury feels a little bit of Ngannou's power, but if it's not even comparable to Deontay Wilder's. Like a lot of these MMA guys, they're eating up this shit about, how, Ngannou, he has the hardest punch on planet Earth. Guarantee you more than likely that Ngannou doesn't even have as hard of a punch as Deontay Wilder. Now, of course, that's a very hard punch to compare it to. But like I said, we'll see.
People believed it and bought into it despite the outcome. So I don't think Canelo and Charlo really gave.
Right, so basically what you just said, Ego, is that a fight can do very, very well even if the other fighter really doesn't have a chance. That's basically what you just said. But Jamel Charlo overall, once again, did have a chance in this fight. It's just that, for those of us that knew boxing, is that we knew that he really didn't have a chance because he's not comparable to Canelo. It just is what it is. But I do agree with Ego to a degree that he is going to have to fight David Benavidez. The thing is overall about Canelo Alvarez is that if he beats David Benavidez, there's just no other fighters there that are going to give him as great a pay-per-view numbers. Because what other fight is really going to sell that well? It's not really going to be David Morrell. It's not going to be Demetrius Andrade. It's not going to be even Dimitri Bivol, as great of a fighter as he is. Eastern European fighters usually don't tend to attract as many numbers. The thing is about 135, and the thing is about some of those lighter weight classes, is that eventually Gervonta Davis, he probably will become the clear face of boxing. because there's a lot of great black and Latin fighters down there, and fighters that he pretty much can fight that are going to have great star appeal, like Devin Haney, Shakur Stevenson, possibly Teofimo Lopez, Regis Prograis, certain other fighters like that.
Was that belief. They didn't give us a crazy buildup, and then the fight itself didn't really deliver. So I gotta say, Gervonta Davis is the face of boxing. All across the board, he's giving you great promotions, great events. He's doing crazy live gates, and he's also doing better on pay-per-view. Let me know what you guys.
He's doing better on pay-per-view with his averages going at about 200 to 250,000. Yeah, okay. No, but anyways, when it comes down to it, but like I said, they've been trying to push this narrative very hard now for a very long time. But Gervonta Tank Davis, in my view, he will eventually become the face of boxing. But, Gervonta Tank Davis, he's also going to have to eventually get in the ring with someone as well that is going to have a chance. Because, people can say whatever they want to about Canelo Alvarez. But Canelo, at least every other year is getting in the ring with someone that has a decent chance against him, or at least is a very good to borderline great fighter. Gervonta Tank Davis is getting in the ring with literal bums. Like, I'm sorry, but Rolly Romero, Hector Garcia, Mario Barrios. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Ryan Garcia, he had a little bit of a chance, and I think I gave him a 40% chance at most, but I don't even think I gave him that. I think I gave him about 30 because his skill set is just very, very flawed. It just is what it is.
Think I'm the best in the business.
But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. I just thought that I would talk about that. Anyways, thank y'all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.